Her true story, from Texas. My son kicked me out and said just die. I don't give a shit, after I paid off his debt, so I took back every cent, with interest. He said I was ungrateful. The bank said otherwise. Mom, please, help me. If you don't help me, I swear I'll die. That was how it began. My phone ringing at 12:08 a.m., pulling me from a shallow sleep into a storm I never saw coming. My son's voice on the other end of the line wasn't the voice of the grown man he had become. It was the voice of a frightened child, trembling, gasping, drenched in panic. Mom, please, he cried. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. I'm in deep. I made a mistake. Slow down, I said, swinging my legs over the bed and switching on the lamp. What's going on? It's the crypto stuff, Mom. I lost more than I should have. The whole market tanked, and now I owe people. Real money, not just investments. I took a loan against the house. Second mortgage. We're in default. If I can't pay by next week, they're going to repossess the house. Samantha doesn't even know the full amount. If she finds out, she might leave. I swear to God, I'm ruined. I sat in silence, my heart beating louder than his voice. This was my only child. My son. The boy I once carried for 9 months. The baby I rocked through the night with nothing but a broken fan and prayer. And now he was falling. Fast. How much? I asked, my voice flat with fear. 80,000? He whispered it like it was a confession, not a number. $80,000. I exhaled slowly and looked around my small bedroom in Texas. The chipped dresser, the framed photo of his graduation, the crocheted blanket I had made to fill empty evenings. My entire world could barely fit into a space worth half that. I didn't say anything else. He kept talking, fast and broken, about the creditors, the legal letters, the fear in his chest every time the doorbell rang. Mom, I know I messed up, but please, you're the only person I can ask. You're all I have. The call ended with a promise to talk in the morning. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my old coffee mug and the debt I didn't create, but now carried, on my shoulders. By dawn, I had made my decision. I drove to the bank with trembling hands and a purse full of old paperwork. I sat down with a loan officer and told her I needed to access every dollar I had. My house, my pension, my savings. I needed it liquid, and I needed it now. The woman blinked. May I ask why? My son, I said simply. He's in trouble. She hesitated. You understand this puts you at significant risk. Your retirement, your home. I understand, I said. He's my son. It took 2 weeks to finalize. In those 2 weeks, I sold my house to a private buyer, moved into a rental apartment near the church, and pulled every cent I had from savings and my modest retirement fund. When I had the cashier's check in my hand, I stared at it like it was both a noose and a lifeline. $80,000, 0 cents. I called my son and told him to meet me at the bank. When I walked in, he was already there. Eyes red, hair disheveled, clothes rumpled like he had not slept in days. He hugged me like a man drowning. I owe you my life, he said. I owe you forever. I handed the envelope to the bank representative. They processed the payment and closed the file. His debt was gone. His house was safe. You'll stay with us, right? He said as we walked to the car. It's only fair. I mean, you've done everything. I nodded, tired but relieved. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe this was when love would finally be met with gratitude. He opened the car door for me. I smiled. He looked at me and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you now." And I believed him. I truly did. Because when your child begs for help with tears in his voice, you do not tally receipts. You open your arms. Even if, later, those arms are the ones pushed away. 6 months. That is how long it took for love to rot into silence, and for silence to harden into resentment. After I paid off his debt, my son insisted I move in with them. "It'll save you money," he said. "You're retired, Mom. No need to be alone in that tiny apartment." Samantha nodded along, even offered to redecorate the guest room. I was hesitant at first. I valued my independence, my slow mornings, my porch garden, my space. But a part of me believed this was his way of showing gratitude, that maybe, finally, I would see the man I had raised become the son I had waited for. The first month was pleasant enough. I baked bread on Sundays, picked up the grandkids from school, helped with laundry when Samantha had meetings. My son kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, and the kids loved having me around. But by the third month, the smiles faded. Samantha began sighing louder whenever I entered a room. The grandkids were told not to bother Grandma when she's tired. My son stayed later at work, and when he did come home, he barely spoke to me. It started with small things. My tea kettle disappeared from the kitchen. My soap in the bathroom was replaced with hers. One evening, I overheard Samantha on the phone. "It's like living with a shadow. She's just always there." I said nothing. I always said nothing. Until that one night at dinner. It was lasagna. I remember it because I made it from scratch, his favorite, the one I used to make every birthday from when he was 8 to 21. I served it warm, the way he liked, and we sat down together. Samantha picked at her plate. The children were quiet. My son stared at his phone. Then, without even looking at me, Samantha said, "This house feels a little cramped lately. Maybe it's time we talk about some long-term arrangements. If Mom could find another place, even temporarily, I think it would really help everyone breathe a little." I froze. The words weren't shouted. They weren't cruel in tone, but they hit like a slap with a velvet glove. My fork paused midair. My son said nothing, midair. My son said nothing. I looked at him, my boy, my only child, and waited. Just one word, one shake of the head, one simple, "That's not fair." But he said nothing. He just kept scrolling. I swallowed hard, set down my fork, and gave a little smile. "Well," I said, "I suppose I can look into options." Nobody answered. Samantha smiled, satisfied. The kids kept eating. I slept light that night. And the next, I started packing some things, quietly, just in case. A week later, I returned home from the grocery store to find the front door locked, and my key no longer worked. At first I thought it was a mistake. I rang the bell, knocked, waited, then texted my son, "Hey, the lock's changed, can someone let me in?" No response. I called. Voicemail. Finally, I sat on the porch until I heard the car pull up. He got out, looked surprised to see me. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing here?" "I live here," I said. Or, I thought I did. He didn't meet my eyes. Samantha stepped out behind him, crossed her arms. "We had to change the locks," she said. "It was a safety thing. The kids—" I cut her off. "You didn't even tell me." My son stepped between us. "Look," he said, "I think it's better this way. You need your own space. It's not working. We're all stressed. You being here, it's too much." Blinked, stunned. "Too much? I paid your debt. I sold my house. I gave you everything I had." His face twisted. "Yeah, well, nobody asked you to. You did that on your own. Now you expect us to babysit you forever?" My voice trembled. "I didn't expect anything," he snapped. "You've lived off me for years, Mom. You've always made me feel like I owed you something. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of carrying you. You're like a leech, just sucking the life out of everything. Why don't you do us all a favor and disappear?" I stood there, on the porch I helped save, staring at a boy I no longer recognized. "Go," he said. "Just go. I'm done." He turned and walked inside. Samantha didn't say anything. She closed the door behind him, and just like that, I was outside. Locked out of the house I had helped preserve. Out in the street, with 2 grocery bags and nowhere to go. I sat on the bench across the street, the lasagna pan still in one of my bags, and I laughed. Quiet, bitter laughter. The kind you laugh when you realize the joke has been on you for decades. Then I stood, straightened my coat, called a cab, and whispered to myself, "All right, Ruth, time to remember who owns what." I left that night with 2 bags, a bruised heart, and a mind sharper than it had been in years. They thought they had broken me. What they did not know, what they never once bothered to ask, was that I had not signed away $80,000 without reading the fine print. I took a cab to a small, quiet street near the old church I used to attend. There was a narrow building there, a retired priest's house turned into modest rental units. 1 bedroom, no view, but clean and cheap. The landlord, a kind widow named Eileen, took one look at me and said, "You've been through something, haven't you?" I nodded. That was all we ever spoke of it. I unpacked slowly over the next few days, folded my clothes into drawers that did not belong to me, arranged old pictures on a windowsill that faced a brick wall, Each night I made myself tea and stared at the ceiling, not crying, not bitter, just remembering. No one called, not my son, not Samantha, not even the grandchildren. For the first time since I was a girl, I felt truly alone. But I was not helpless. That's where they were wrong. Before I had paid that debt, I had insisted on one thing, one small forgotten request at the bank that no one questioned because they were too desperate to read the documents. I was not just a silent cosigner. I was the principal on the loan. It had been my money, my name, and my signature. I had asked the loan officer, quietly but firmly, to put me as the official borrower and to list the property, my son's home, as collateral. It was a subtle move tucked into legal language and paper that no one at that table really looked at. Not my son, not his wife. They thought I was just handing over cash. They had no idea they were putting their house in my hands. I pulled out the folder from my suitcase one evening, sat on the floor with a cup of lukewarm tea, and spread out the documents like old love letters. There it was. Borrower, Ruth M. Talbot. Secured property, 1159 Wisteria Lane. Lien holder, First Texas Savings. Their home. My name. I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not a vindictive one, just steady. They wanted me gone. They wanted me erased. But the funny thing about paper is that it remembers what people forget. I whispered aloud to the silence. They want me dead? Fine, let them see what a ghost can do. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months, because I knew something they did not. I was not just the woman they pushed out the door. I was the owner of the rope they were dangling from, and the knots were beginning to slip. 1 year passed, quietly, deliberately. I spent my days volunteering at the church food pantry and taking long walks through the neighborhood. People there knew me simply as Miss Ruth, the older lady with calm eyes and steady hands. No one knew I used to own a house. No one knew what had been taken from me, or what I had taken back, silently, with a signature. Then, one crisp morning in late October, Eileen knocked on my door holding the community newspaper. "Isn't this your son?" she asked, pointing at a small photo in the corner. It was. There he was, standing next to Samantha in front of what looked like a commercial lot, smiling wide for the camera. The headline read, "Local couple launches Dream Cafe in downtown Strip." I stared at it for a long time, read the text twice. They had listed their home, sold it or tried to fund a business. My hands were steady as I folded the paper. 3 days later, my phone rang. I did not recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Same number. And again. The fourth time, I answered. It was my son. "Mom?" he said, voice shaky, rushed. "Listen, I know it's been a while, but we need to talk. It's urgent." I said nothing. He took a breath. "We're trying to sell the house, to open the cafe. You probably saw the article. But the bank's saying we can't finalize anything without your signature. They said you're the primary on the loan, that your name's on the secured deed." I waited, he continued, faster now. "We didn't realize. We thought once it was paid. Anyway, it's just a technical thing, just paperwork. If you could come in and sign." I cut him off. "Why would you need me for anything?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because the bank says we can't move forward without you." "No," I said. "I mean, why would you need me? I thought I was a leech, a burden, someone who should just die." Silence. "Mom," he finally whispered. "I was angry. I didn't mean it." "Oh, but you did," I said gently. "You meant every word. Words don't fall out by accident, son. They come from somewhere." He was crying now. I could hear it. The soft, strangled kind of weeping that comes when someone realizes they have no cards left. "I'm sorry," he said. "Please. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I let the silence hang between us. Then I asked, soft as rain, "What was that?" "Say it again." I said, "I'm sorry." "No," I said, "not that part." He sniffed. "Please, Mom, just help us." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the maple tree that had begun to turn gold. "Say it," I whispered. A pause. Then, in the faintest voice, he said, "I owe you. I owe you everything." I smiled. Now that, I said, I can finally hear. They showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. No call, no warning, just a soft knock at the door, and two shadows through the frosted glass. I opened it slowly. Samantha stood there, mascara smudged, lips trembling. My son stood behind her, hands jammed deep into his pockets, his eyes fixed on the floor like a guilty schoolboy. "Hi, Miss Ruth," Samantha whispered. She had never called me that before. Not once. "Come in," I said. They entered the modest little unit, awkward and unsure, standing in the doorway like children waiting to be called in. Samantha's eyes were swollen. She had been crying, or trying not to. My son stood behind her, not touching her, not touching me, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, like they were hiding everything he did not know how to say. I had set out 2 cups of tea, not because I expected them. I had not heard a word in 14 months, but because some part of me, the part that still dreamed against my better judgment, had known this moment would come. They did not touch the tea. They sat across from me at the small kitchen table, knees knocking against the wood, silence stretching between us like a third guest. The walls around us were thin. The apartment was nothing more than a borrowed box of space. 1 bedroom, a squeaky ceiling fan, and the faint smell of old lemons. But it was mine. Every square inch of it was paid for with truth. And they could feel that. Samantha began crying almost immediately. "We messed up," she said. Her voice was high, brittle, as if speaking honestly still scraped her throat. "We didn't mean to hurt you. Things got stressful and God, we were horrible to you." I said nothing. I had no intention of rushing her grief. She had rushed my exit. I could wait, she went on, tears tracing thin lines through her makeup. "The cafe was our dream. We invested everything we had, maxed out cards, took loans. We thought the house would sell fast, fund the whole thing. We didn't realize about the paperwork until it was too late. The buyers are backing out unless we can clear the lien. The bank won't move without you." Her voice cracked on the last word. Still, my son said nothing. I turned to him. "Anything to add?" He shook his head. His eyes were locked on a crack in the tile floor, like it held all the answers he never learned how to find. The same boy who once built Lego castles in my living room now sat like a man whose walls had crumbled and buried him inside. I stood slowly and walked to the kitchen drawer. I knew exactly where the folder was. Thick, crisp, marked with a blue ribbon. The kind used for birth certificates, marriage licenses, and the kind of legal documents people think no one reads. I placed it on the table. Their eyes followed it like it might explode. "This," I said, opening it, "is a copy of the loan agreement. This is the mortgage deed. This is the lien confirmation from the bank. And this," I slid out one final page, neatly printed, freshly signed, notarized, "is the repayment demand. $100,000. Principal plus 12% interest. Standard. Nothing personal." Samantha gasped like the air had left the room. My son looked like he had been slapped. His shoulders slumped. For once, he looked less like a man being punished and more like a boy being held accountable. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. "I am," I said calmly. "You borrowed from me. You locked me out of the house I helped you save. You pretended I never existed. Now, if you want your house free and clear, you will pay what you owe." "But we don't have that kind of money," Samantha said, her voice rising. "We've spent everything. We've already put down payment on equipment, furniture. Our entire future is tied to that house." I nodded slowly, folding my hands. "Then I will sell the house." She blinked at me, stunned. "But it's our home." "No," I said, my voice even. "It was never yours. It was my loan, my security, my name. You gambled with something you never owned. And now the dealer is at the table, asking to be paid." My son opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long while. And in that moment, I saw the flicker of someone who finally understood the cost of casual cruelty. He had not just betrayed me, he had disrespected the very soil he had been planted in. They sat in stunned silence. I lifted the cup of tea, which had long gone cold, and took a slow sip. It was bitter, but not unbearable, and in that silence, I let them sit. I let them feel what it was like to be on the other side of a closed door, to realize the welcome mat had been pulled back not out of spite, but because it had been stepped on one too many times. I said nothing more, because some things don't need to be said twice. They are paid in full, just like the house, just like the lesson, with interest. That night, after they left in silence, I sat alone at my small kitchen table and opened the photo box I kept tucked away beneath the bed. I had not looked through it in years. Dust clung to the edges, but the memories inside were sharp as ever. There he was, my boy, at age 10, front teeth missing, grinning with his arms wrapped around my waist at the county fair. There he was at his high school graduation, a wrinkled gown, 2 big shoes, and pride in his eyes, as he searched for me in the crowd. And there was the photo I always kept near the front. He was 26. I had just passed my driving test at age 60, after months of practicing in the church parking lot with an instructor who smelled of peppermint and wore a cowboy hat. I remember feeling so embarrassed to be learning so late, so out of place. But when I stepped outside the DMV that evening, there he was, my son, standing beside my old station wagon holding a sign that read, in sloppy black marker, "My mom can drive, even at 60. So, watch out, Texas." I had laughed so hard I cried. He had brought flowers, a cupcake, a card that said, "You always said I could do anything. Now I get to say it back." I traced my fingers along the edges of the photo now, the ink faded but the warmth still alive. I did not hate my son. I hated what ingratitude had done to him. I hated the small, creeping entitlement that had eaten away at the boy who once made handmade birthday cards and stayed up all night to help me clean motel rooms when we were behind on rent. He had not been raised to be cruel. He had not been taught that money was more important than people. I taught him to shake hands with strangers, to tip waiters well, to say please and thank you like a prayer. I taught him how to make soup from scratch, how to fix a button, how to apologize without excuses. But life has its own curriculum, and sometimes the lessons we teach are overridden by what the world rewards. That was the part that hurt the most. Still, I chose not to let bitterness rot my bones. Instead, I gave my time to the church pantry. Every Wednesday morning, I stood in that tiny back room of the church, sorting cans, folding clothes, handing out hot meals. I learned the names of the people most folks crossed the street to avoid. Dolores, who slept under the bridge and carried her Bible in a Ziploc bag. Kenny, who lost his job and wife in the same month, but still told jokes like they were life preservers. I washed dishes, mopped floors, patched up old jackets, and never once told them where I came from. Not because I was ashamed, but because my story was not special there. We were all people who had been discarded, who had been told in one way or another that we no longer served a purpose, that we were too old, too poor, too broken. But I had learned something in that tiny room filled with steam and kindness. The most forgotten among us often carry the clearest vision of what matters. We know how to hold silence. We know how to spot a lie by how it stands. We know that dignity is not a thing you are given. It is something you guard, quietly, fiercely, and without apology. I folded the photos back into their box and placed them beneath the bed again. And I whispered to the night, "You were a good boy once. Maybe that boy is still in there somewhere, but I cannot be the one to dig him out." The day after our quiet meeting, my son called me again. His voice was low, softer than it used to be, the sharpness worn down by fear. "Mom," he said, we cannot come up with the money that fast. Not 100,000. Not in 30 days. I listened. "We are trying. Samantha has talked to her parents. I called the bank, but it is just not possible right now." I said nothing. Then he asked, "Could you give us more time? Just a little more?" "Ever." I thought about it. Thought about the cold night on the porch, the slammed door, the words he had shouted like stones. But I did not want revenge. I only wanted to teach him the price of what he had said. "I will give you 30 days, I said. Not a minute more. He thanked me, again and again, but I heard no joy in his voice, only delay, only dread. 30 days came and went. No payment arrived. No miracle surfaced. So I did what any lender would do. I filed the petition to initiate the property sale. My name was on the deed. My name was on the debt. The law did not blink. It simply processed. At the courthouse, the judge reviewed the documents, checked the signatures, glanced at the timeline. He looked at me and asked gently, "Are you certain this is what you want, ma'am?" "I am," I said, with both hands steady. The order was signed. The process began. 2 weeks later, movers pulled up to the house. Not their movers, the bank's. They had 30 minutes to gather what they could. Everything else was listed for auction. Neighbors peeked from curtains. Samantha cried on the front lawn. My son stood frozen, keys in his hand, but nowhere left to open. I did not go that day. Instead, I sat at my desk, printed a single photo, placed it in an envelope, and wrote no message, just their names. The photo showed a foundation being poured on a plot of land outside Amarillo. Fresh cement, framing beams, a small sign stuck in the dirt, future home of R.M. Talbot Est, 2025. It was my new house, modest but mine, paid for in full with the proceeds from the sale. I did not send a message. I did not gloat. The photo said enough. This is what a leech can build, when left alone long enough to grow her own roots. I am no longer the weak mother they whispered about behind closed doors. I am no longer the woman who stood on a porch with grocery bags in hand, hoping someone would open the door she once paid for. I am the woman who remembers every word, every silence, every dismissal that was meant to shrink me. But I did not rise for revenge. I rose for clarity, because I needed to know who I truly was when no one else saw me. And now, I do. I am not the villain in their story. I am not the savior either. I am simply the lesson. It was a quiet afternoon when the phone rang again. This time, it was my son. His voice was stripped bare. No pride left to hold him up. "Mom," he said, "I understand now. I see what I did. I see what I lost. But it's too late, isn't it?" I paused, listening not just to the words, but to the weight they carried. Then I said, gently but firmly, "It's never too late to begin again. But I don't pay twice for the same lesson." He cried. I let him, and I hung up, knowing that for the first time he was finally listening. To life, to loss, to the cost of mistaking love for obligation. And maybe, just maybe, he would grow from the ruins. But I was no longer the soil for someone else's roots. I had planted my own. I am no longer the weak mother they whispered about behind closed doors. I am no longer the woman who stood quietly at the edge of family photos, always cropped out by someone else's comfort. No longer the one who made herself smaller just to fit into a space that was never offered freely. I am no longer the woman who stood on a porch with grocery bags in hand, hoping someone would open the door she once paid for. No longer the mother who accepted silence in place of apology, or who traded her dignity for a moment of borrowed peace. I am the woman who remembers every word, every silence, every dismissal that was meant to shrink me. I remember the way my name was never mentioned when the credit came, only when the blame arrived. I remember being told I was too much when I offered help, and not enough when I needed it. But I did not rise for revenge. I rose for clarity. I rose because I needed to see myself outside their shadow. I needed to know who I truly was when no one else saw me. And now, I do. I am not the villain in their story. I am not the savior either. I am simply the lesson, the kind that arrives after the storm, quiet and enduring, the kind that doesn't need to shout because it carries the weight of truth. It was a quiet afternoon when the phone rang again. My hands were busy folding laundry, just 2 towels and a shirt I'd sewn myself. The sun was soft through the curtains, and the kettle on the stove had just begun to hum. I looked at the screen. It was my son. The last time I heard his voice, it was brittle with desperation. Now, it sounded stripped of something deeper. No anger, no excuses, no pride left to hold him up. "Mom," he said, almost breathless, like the word had taken effort. "I understand now. I see what I did. I see what I lost." I didn't speak. "But it's too late, isn't it?" I sat in the silence for a while. Not to make him squirm, not to punish, but to let the moment breathe, because some words deserve stillness after them. Some truths only echo when the world is quiet enough to hear. Then I said, gently but firmly, "It's never too late to begin again. But I don't pay twice for the same lesson." There was a sound, something between a sigh and a sob. He cried, and I let him, not because I wanted to hear his pain, but because I wanted him to hear it himself, to sit in it, to feel what I had felt when the front door locked behind me and no one came out. When I hung up, I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel victorious. I felt, still, like the dust had finally settled on a house that once stood in my heart, but now lived only in memory. Because for the first time, he was finally listening to life, to loss, to the cost of mistaking love for obligation and gratitude for weakness. Maybe, just maybe, He would grow from the ruins. But I was no longer the soil for someone else's roots. I had planted my own, and they were taking hold. They were growing quietly, like all true things do. Not in the spotlight, not with applause, but in the gentle rhythm of days spent choosing peace over noise. I began to love mornings again. The way the sunlight filtered through the blinds, the smell of clean sheets, the sound of birds I had never noticed when I was busy surviving. I made soup from scratch again, just for myself. I found a small second-hand piano and played the old hymns until my fingers ached and my heart unclenched. I started writing letters to people I hadn't spoken to in years, not to reopen old wounds, but to close them softly. I learned how to laugh again, not because something was funny, but because I remembered that I still could. And in those quiet moments, I realized something no one tells you when your heart breaks. You are not meant to stay broken. You are allowed to outgrow the roles they wrote for you. You are allowed to be more than what they remember. You are allowed to become new. I did not get everything back, but I got back enough. Enough to smile without flinching. Enough to stand without apology. Enough to say with a full heart and steady voice that I am not who they said I was. I am not the woman they forgot. I am the woman who remembered herself. And that, my dear, is the kind of memory that cannot be erased. Not by silence, not by shame, not even by love that turned away too soon. Because love, real love, the kind that does not shrink, the kind that does not tally, the kind that says even now, that love begins when you love yourself enough to stop giving away pieces of your soul just to be seen. I am Ruth M. Talbot, and I have seen myself. At last. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you've ever been called a burden, if you've ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, if you've ever been made to feel like your love was a weight instead of a gift, then know this: you are not alone. There are many of us, scattered across quiet kitchens and forgotten guest rooms. We are the ones who gave everything and asked for nothing, who carried more than our share and were told we were in the way. We are the mothers who gave our youth, our sleep, our savings, and still heard, "You didn't do enough." But let me tell you something. We remember. We remember every thankless sacrifice. We remember every slammed door, every withheld smile, every time they spoke of us like we weren't in the room. I'm a mother from Texas. I gave my only child everything I had, my home, my savings, my future, because he asked me to, because that is what mothers do. And when he turned his back, when he told me I was nothing but a leech, I did not scream. I did not beg. I remembered, and then I stood up, because love is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes in the form of a bank statement. Sometimes it arrives in silence, wrapped in legal documents with interest attached. Sometimes love says, I remember what I gave, and I remember what it cost. This story is not about revenge. It's about clarity, about what happens when a woman stops waiting to be valued and starts valuing herself, about what blooms when the soil of sacrifice is finally reclaimed by the one who watered it. I don't tell my story because I want sympathy. I tell it because I know there are women out there, good, loyal, strong women who are waiting to be heard, women who are made to feel invisible, women whose names are only spoken when someone needs something. And I want you to know, your story matters, even if they laughed at you, even if they left you, even if they called you too old, too much, too late, especially then. Because wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when we finally speak, not with rage, but with truth, it shakes the very ground beneath the ones who thought we had no voice left. If this story touched something inside you, some quiet ache, some buried memory, then I invite you to stay, to keep listening, to know that there is a place where your voice isn't just welcome, it's necessary. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, a place where every mother has a voice and every tear has its reason. Here we don't sugarcoat, we don't sanitize, we tell it like it is, because for too long it's been told for us, misunderstood, minimized, mocked. But not anymore. This isn't just storytelling, it's remembering out loud. And sometimes remembering is the strongest kind of justice there is. So to every woman who's been dismissed, disrespected, or discarded, I see you. To every mother who gave her all and was told it still wasn't enough, I hear ya. And to every soul who's been told to just get over it, you don't have to. You just have to begin. Begin by knowing that your pain has weight, that your story has shape, that your truth, no matter how quiet, is still yours. Begin by joining us, because this world may forget what we said, but it will never forget that we finally said it.